I hope you are feeling better. We heard you were ill. You were also muted.
Sorry, I was saying I wasn't sick. Everyone else in my house is, but they're recovering. All right, let's give it one more minute.
Deborah, were you planning to attend the event on Friday night?
No, but I was supposed to be there for other parts of the Shabbat, but my husband had COVID and my son had a bad sinus infection, and on the whole, it would have been hard to find one healthy person in my house, much less consider it a good idea for me to breathe on other people. So I stayed home.
Right. No, I know. I think the rabbi had explained that, but I just wanted to ask you if you had found Shuli Mishkin, did you arrange for her to come?
Oh, I think that the original contact was Rabbi Cheses.
Oh, because she was very good.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm really sorry I missed it.
Yeah, she spoke very well, and she was really entertaining. I think it was really a lovely Shabbos. She really did a good job. So I just wanted to tell you.
Good, thank you. I'm really glad for the feedback, and I really sorry I missed it. And hopefully we can have other excellent things in the future.
Right. I'm sure.
I hope so. Okay, so this is part 32 of our series, which will someday end, on the first chapter of Sanhedrin. We might even finish in the next month or two before the end of the semester. I'm not sure. In any case, we are coming to the end-ish of the material from the Mishnah. And we're going to spend tonight mostly on a single line of the Mishnah, which the Gemara has chopped up into little pieces. But in each case, I put in the translation, the translation of the whole sentence, and I just left out of brackets whatever piece it was that they were quoting in that particular occasion. But we're going to quote this line of the Mishnah, different fragments of this line of the Mishnah several times over the course of the evening. And that is, we don't judge a tribe, a false prophet, or a high priest unless it's with a court of 71. And we are going to start by trying to figure out what this tribe part means. Not because it actually also looks sort of like one of these games that we used to have on Sesame Street, which one of these things is not like the others, because the truth is that a high priest and a false prophet are both individual prominent people, whereas a tribe doesn't seem to fit in that group. And that may also be in the back of the Gemara's mind, but it's not explicitly the question that they asked. What the Gemara actually asked is, at least to start with, Hai Shevet dechata b'mai. So this tribe that we're judging with a court of 71, what sort of crime is it that they're accused of? Ilema Shevet shechilelet Shabbat. So if we say that it's a tribe that violated Shabbat, then Emar de Palig Rachmana ben Yechidim lemerubim le'inyan avodat kochavim yishar mitzvot mi Palig. So granting that God does seem to distinguish between individuals and populations for the purpose of idol worship, but where do you have any evidence that God just makes that distinction, by any other mitzvah? So that is considered to be a good enough argument, and we move on. It must in fact be Ela b'shevet shehudach. It must be a tribe that was seduced into committing idolatry. Lememra de bedina de rabim daininan. So that must be, if we're judging a tribe, the court of 71. It sounds like we're judging the tribe as a whole, as a one. We're going to have one trial for a group of defendants, and that's ordinarily we haven't discussed this directly, but ordinarily each criminal gets their own trial. Like there's only really one exception to that, which is the Ir Hanidachat, which let's actually go there now and take a look at Devarim 13. Because that's going to be the paradigm that we're following or refusing to follow. It's really the only paradigm the Torah has for collective criminal punishment, as opposed to you could have more than one person who committed a crime, but supposing that that happens, you're going to try and punish each one individually. It's not going to be that the group doesn't have a corporate nature. Okay, so here I am in Devarim 13, verse 13. Ki tishma be'achad arecha, when you hear about one of your cities, asher Hashem Elokecha noten lecha lashevet sham lemor, that God has allowed you to live there, and you hear the following. Yatzu anashim b'nei v'li'al mikirbecha, some bad people have come out from among you. V'yadichu et yoshvei Iram, and they've seduced the people who live in their city. Le'mor nelcha v'na'avda Elohim acherim asher lo yadatem, saying, let's go, let's worship some other gods, some unfamiliar gods that you don't know. V'darashta v'chakarta v'sha'alta heitev. So you'll investigate and you'll inquire and you'll ask, well, and if it turns out that it's true and it's real, that this terrible thing has been done in your midst, then you must attack the residents of that city at the edge of the sword, destroy them, and everything that's in it, and also its animals need to be put to the sword. That kol shalala tikbotz el toch rechova v'sarafta ba'esh et ha'ir. That kol shalala kalil. Right, so you take all of the stuff that belongs to the city, which normally it sounds like we're describing a battle scene, but in a normal battle scene, you'd get to take the stuff home. That would be how we pay the soldiers. But in this case, all of the plunder is going to be gathered and piled in the road of the city, and then you burn the city down with all of its stuff completely. Tel olam, and then it needs to be a permanent. A tel is the remains of a destroyed city. The permanent tel, lo tibane od, it cannot be rebuilt. And that is really the only form of collective judicial punishment that you can find as a mitzvah. It's called an ir hanidachat, and that's so when we said a minute ago that the Torah has a model for group punishment for idolatry, but not for anything else, this is the model it's talking about. Okay, so we seem to be saying, the Torah was talking about an individual city, but maybe that we can expand and say maybe a whole tribe could be seduced into idolatry and can be treated the same way. The problem is that that makes it sound like we're going to have collective punishment for a whole tribe. Kiman, so according to whom? Loko Rabbi Yoshaya, Loko Rabbi Yonatan. That's not going to work according to either. Interesting. Okay, I apologize. My translation has the wrong name. It should be Rabbi Yonatan, not Rabbi Yochanan. Sorry about that. Because the two positions that we know about how many people you can do this collective punishment with, neither of them is going to admit of this interpretation. Titania ad kama osim ir hanidachat. So we have a braita that says how many residents can you include in an ir hanidachat? Miyud v'ad kuf divrei Rabbi Yoshaya. Rabbi Yoshaya says it has to be between 10 and 100. That's when we say city in the Torah, we mean what you and I would barely call a village. I mean, just to keep things in context here. Rabbi Yonatan Omer mikufad rubo shel shevet. Rabbi Yonatan has a much larger, much more expansive vision, and he says between 100 and the majority of a tribe. So up to half of the tribe he's willing to allow. But our Mishnah seemed to be talking about trying an entire tribe for something. So that's twice as many as the largest number that we could imagine here in this braita. I feel Rabbi Yonatan lo kamar el rubo. Even Rabbi Yonatan, and he's our expansive guy, doesn't have a number that's larger than most of a tribe. Avakula lo, but he's not going to allow all of it. Amar of Matna. So Rav Matna says, never mind. We're not talking about the tribe. We're talking about the leader of a tribe who sinned. And in that case, it doesn't seem like it needs to be idolatry anymore. It may be that it's any kind of death penalty you're going to carry out against the leader of a tribe. You're going to need to try him in a court of 70. Milo Amar Rav Ada bar Ahava. So hasn't Rav Ada bar Ahava said, and we're going to quote Rav Ada bar Ahava at least once more this evening. He's going to play a pretty big role in this Gemara. Ho davar gadol yavo elecha, devarav shel gadol. So this is the scene in Parshat Yitro before the giving of the Torah. When Yitro comes to visit, he gets up in the morning, he sees Moshe sitting all day with people coming to consult him, and he says, there's no way you can do this. And he helps him to set up a tiered court system with a hierarchy so that the easy cases can just get dealt with by somebody else, and then they can triage the hard cases and bring them to him. And in that context, Yitro says to Moshe, and the big thing they'll bring to you. So Rav Ada bar Ahava says, what's the big thing? The big thing is a thing of a big person. He reverses the order of the words, meaning anything having to do with somebody important, that's going to go all the way to the top. And our equivalent of a Supreme Court here which is Moshe in the desert, but our equivalent here in the Mishnah and the Gemara is a court of 71. So Hainami Gadol, this guy, this Nasi Shevet, this tribal leader, is also a Gadol. He's big. So that our Rav Matna says the case in our Mishnah should be the case that's like what Rav Adabar Ahava says is happening in the desert, where important people are tried by the Supreme Court. Ula Amar Rabbi Elazar. Ula said that Rabbi Elazar said, and there's a word missing here if that's what it means, but as far as I can tell, that's what it means. He says, now maybe it's not this tribal leader thing. Maybe it's when there's a fight about land ownership. And maybe we're trying to replicate what there was at the beginning when the land was first allocated, when Yehoshua brought the people into the land and they conquered it and then they divided it up. At that point, maybe we're trying to reproduce that moment when we have to redraw land boundaries. So just like that land division was done with 71 elders, this one should also be done with 71 elders.
But yeah. Still the Mishnah used the language of a tribe. So
it might be that Rav Matna means a land dispute between tribes.
Right, I see the possible connection. The inheritance was done by tribes and the giving out of the parcels of land was done by tribes. But doesn't it seem like a bit of a stretch to say that we judge a tribe, meaning we judge issues of Nachala based on a court of 71?
It's possible that if we hadn't tossed this out for a different reason, we would have brought that challenge also. But we're going to dismiss it so quickly that I'm not sure we would even get to that kind of very reasonable critique. So it says, if you're going to make an analogy to the original land allocation, then Klape Urim V'Tumim V'Kol Yisrael, you have to do the allocation in front of the Urim V'Tumim and in front of the entire Jewish people. Are you planning to reassemble the entire Jewish people, and are you not going to have this trial unless you have the Urim V'Tumim? The Urim V'Tumim have been missing since the destruction of the first temple. Does that mean you think it's been 600 years since we carried out this halacha? Right? Like we're definitely almost making fun of the logic here. So if you're going to do it like the beginning, then that was in front of the Urim V'Tumim and all of Israel. Afkan klape Urim V'Tumim v'chol Yisrael. This should also have to be done in front of the Urim V'Tumim and all of Israel. And the Gemara says, yeah, that's not going to work. Ela machavarta kid Rav Matna. No, it must in fact be that it's like what Rav Matna said. Rav Matna was the one who said that it's a tribal leader. And as I sort of implied at the beginning, Rav Matna also fits better into the structure of the Mishnah because everybody else in that sentence is a single prominent person. So saying that it's the Nasi of a tribe who's being tried the same way as the Kohen Gadol is, or a prophet who we're deciding whether or not he's a false prophet, it kind of like it fits in better than any of the other things that we've suggested.
And is there any explanation as to why the text didn't say Nasi and said the whole tribe?
In fact, there isn't even an objection along those lines. The easy way out would be to do the usual thing and say that the structure of the Mishnah is adjusted to make the rhyming pattern fit whatever the music was they were singing it to. And that's sort of cheating because since we don't know what the music was, it's impossible to ever challenge that.
Right.
Say that about anything.
Right, exactly.
But for some reason, it seems to be normal to the Mishnah that would be saying tribe instead of tribal leader would just be normal. The truth is that we deal with countries all the time in Tanakh. The word Mitzrayim means paro, not infrequently. And even in that kind of metonymy and what's the other one, Schenectady, those come and go with country leaders and their countries all the time. It's not so unusual. to
Right.
use the name of the leader to mean the country or vice versa. So
Right, so I could see it the other way around, though. I don't know if I would see tribe as meaning the leader. I could see the leader meaning the whole tribe because he's the representative. But,
I mean, at least sometimes, at least in Tanakh, it can go the other way also. You get the word
Yeah.
Mitzrayim used when what we clearly mean is the king. You get Plishtim used when we clearly mean is their king. I don't think it's so unusual.
Okay,
In any case, so that's what we are for the moment concluding that it's Rav Matna, although Ravina wants to go back to the other option. Ravina Amar Leolam B'Shevet Shehudach. He says, no, really, it was a whole tribe that was seduced into idolatry. And he says, and I can solve your problem about the collective punishment not being mentioned for that in the Torah. Because and the problem you have that we're judging them with collective punishment, and it's too big a group for that. Okay, sure, yeah. We're going to kill them one at a time. But we're going to try them as a group. I'm not sure why this makes Ravina feel better, because it seems to me that the trial is the important part. That's the part where the justice is happening. It doesn't really matter how many people you kill at once. The question of whether you decide individually whether to kill people seems to me like a much more important moral question than how large a group of people you kill simultaneously. But apparently it made Ravina feel better. Mila Amar Rabbi Chama Rabbi Yosei Amar Rabbi Oshaya. So didn't Rabbi Chama Bar Yosei say in the name of Rabbi Oshaya? And here we have a pasuk in Devarim 17:5 about I think it's just a generalized death penalty, but let's take a look. Yeah, this is the general description of how to carry out a death penalty. When there's found among you in one of your gates where that God gave you, a man or a woman who does the evil in the eyes of God to violate his covenant, and he went and served other gods and bowed to them, or the sun or the moon, or to anything else in the sky that I didn't command. This language actually is very similar to what we saw a moment ago with Irei Dafat. It will be told to you, and you'll listen, and you'll investigate, and it will turn out that it's true. This terrible thing was done in Israel. Then you'll take out that man or that woman who did this terrible thing to your gates, either the man or the woman. And we seem to be really trying to drive it home here that this is not a gendered thing. And then you'll stone them with rocks and they'll die. The gate, incidentally, seems to represent the court. And it certainly in our Gemara, it represents the local court. Possibly because the gate of the city was the only indoor publicly owned space. So that's where you did your governmental activities. And don't think a gate like in one of our walls, think a gate in like a 20-foot thick stone wall. So it's really a tunnel going through the wall. And so it's a protected indoor space that belongs to everybody. It's a good place to do your government stuff. In any case, so Rabbi Chama bar Rabbi Yossi said in the name of Rabbi Oshaya that pasuk means ish o isha tamotze l'sharachan, a man or a woman you can take out to your gate. But you can't take the whole city out to the gate. Meaning, if you're going to need to try something that's substantially more than one person or two people, you need to go to a higher court. The court that sits in your local gate is not qualified to try a trial that's the whole city. And so Ravina is borrowing that for our case. Likewise here, one man or one woman you can take to your gate. But you can't take a whole tribe to your gate. Meaning you're going to need a different venue for this trial. It may even be that Ravina means that we're going to have individual trials for every member of the Shevet, and he doesn't actually mean it's collective punishment. He just means if you have that many perpetrators, you need a higher court. Or he may actually mean collective punishment. I'm really not, or at least collective trial. I'm really not clear on exactly his parameters here. Okay. The next bit of our line from the Mishnah was the false prophet. He's the next person on our list of people who can only be tried by a court of 71. So from how do we know this? Not how do we know that we're going to try a false prophet, but how do we know that a false prophet gets tried by a court of 71? So I'm Rabbi Yosei, Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Yosei says, Rabbi Yosei, the son of Rabbi Chanina, says, it comes Atya Hazada Mizakein Mamre. It comes from a Gzera Shava from Zakein Mamre. And all of that requires a little bit of discussion. First of all, the Zakein Mamre is the case of the, we usually translate it the rebellious elder, but what has happened in this passage is the Torah says, if you don't know what the law is, the lower court don't know what the law is, then you need to travel to Yerushalayim and inquire of the court there. And then you have to do what they say. And if you don't do what they say after they tell you what the law is, that's a capital crime and we're going to put you to death. Okay, so there seems to be an obligation on the lower court to follow the ruling of the upper court, not necessarily on the individual citizens, although it's not clear what difference that makes. Okay, and the other thing that's worth mentioning here is, and Gzera Shava, a lot of the time we talk about how it's the same word in two different places, but this is not the same word. It's just the use of the same shoresh in two different places. Let's actually look at our psukim. So we've got Devarim 17:12 and 18:20, and I'm turning too many pages here. Devarim 17:12. This is about the Zakein Mamre. This is the rebellious elder. It says, "V'ha'ish asher yaseh v'zadon," and a man who does on purpose a deliberate sin. Levilti shamoa el hakohen ha'omed l'sharet sham et Hashem elokecha o el hashofet. Do not listen to the kohen who serves God there or the judge. Umeta ishahu uviarta haram Yisrael. Then that man will die, and you will eliminate the evil from Israel. Okay, so the word there was bizadon, with deliberate sin. And a chapter or so later, in 1820, we have Achanavi asher yazid ledaber davar bishmi, but a prophet who will deliberately sin to speak a word in my name, at asher lo tzivitiv ledaber, which I did not command him to say, or if he's going to say it in the name of a different God, and that prophet will die. You can ask all the theological questions you'd like about how it's possible for somebody to do something God doesn't want them to do, or for that matter, how people can possibly tell which things God commanded the prophet to say, which ones that he didn't command them to say. Yeah, those are all great questions. I don't have answers to any of them. But the question I want to ask is, how are we making a connection between a noun, zadon, in 1712 and a verb, yazid, in 1820? But that's the way it is. Sometimes Gzera Shavas can work on just a shoresh. There are actually also Gzera Shavas that sometimes have words that are have no linguistic connection at all, but have similarities of meaning. And you can even have a make Xera Shava out of, well, those words sound like they mean similar things. There's all of this is a very strong argument for the claim that you can't have Xera Shava unless you have an ancient tradition to have one, because otherwise you could prove absolutely anything from any two pieces of text. In any case, Rabbi Yosef, son of Rabbi Chanina, says that we learned from the Zaken Mamre, from the similarity in language, that the false prophet has a court of 71 to try him. Malahalan shivim vechad, afkan shivim vechad. Just like over there you've got 71, here you also have 71. Only problem with that is it's not true. But it says, but wait a minute. When it said Zayin Vav Dalid about the Zaken Mamre, that was about his getting killed. And Viktala Besrim Vitzlatahu, and the Zaken Mamre is tried and killed by a court of 23. So if we connect these two cases together, you're going to end up with the false prophet getting tried and killed by a court of 23 also, which is not where we're trying to go. So this cannot work. Ella, Amar Reish Lakish. So Reish Lakish said, no, you're right that we need to connect these two cases, but you got the wording wrong. Reish Lakish says, Gamar davar mihamrato. Let's instead connect Daled Bet Reish from a little bit earlier in the passage about the Zaken Mamre, at the time when we are discovering what it is that he's going to rebel against. We had the pasuk ve'asita al pi hadavar asher yagidu lecha min hamakom hahu, right? And you will do according to the thing that they will tell you from that place, asher yivchar Hashem, which God will choose. V'shamarta la'asot b'chol asher yivchar. Be very careful to do what they teach you. Okay, so we had the word davar there, and we also have the word davar by the false prophet. In 1820, the same verse that we had a minute ago, because he is saying a davar that God didn't command. And that connects the false prophet to the beginning of the Zaken Mamre conversation, back when he heard the thing that he's now going to disobey. And since he heard it from a court of 71, that connects the false prophet back to a court of 71. So Reish Lakish says, all I have to do is connect the beginning of the rebellious elder piece to the end of the false prophet piece. And now the false prophet is connected to a court of 71. He's not going to disobey a court of 71. That doesn't make any sense in his case. His only connection to a court is that he's going to be tried by a court. So it must be he's being tried by a court of 71. But the Gemara says, wait a minute, Reish Lakish. If I can make that connection, and now I've got the false prophet being tried by a court of 71, then v'lehadar zaken mamre v'ligmar hazada minavi sheker. Let's turn around and run the other Xera Shava back the other direction. And let's connect the Navi Sheker using the deliberate sin language. Let's connect the Navi Sheker back to the end of the rebellious elder case. And now let's try the rebellious elder with 71. We could learn the rebellious elder from the false prophet, who we learned from the rebellious elder, and end up with both of them getting tried by 71. But we're not going to do that because davar gamir, hazada lo gamir. So Reish Lakish's claim anyway is that there was a tradition to learn from davar. There was not a tradition to learn from hazada. That doesn't explain why we suggested we could do it to begin with. Maybe Reish Lakish just claimed we were wrong. But in the end, Reish Lakish is going to stick by a court of 71 to try a false prophet and a court of 23 to try a rebellious elder. Okay, the next phrase in our quote from the Mishnah was Veloet Kohen Hagadol. We also can't try the high priest unless we've got a court of 71. Where are we getting that from? And now we quote Rav Ada bar Ahava again. We had him before, we've got him again now. Amar Rav Ada bar Ahava de Amar Kra, Kol hadavar hagadol yaviu elecha. So this is that same pasuk that Yitro said to Moshe, they'll bring every big thing to you. Divarav shel gadol, and Rav Ada bar Ahava, not surprisingly, because we just quoted him about 20 minutes ago, says that means things that are related to the great, as opposed to great things. And so we seem at this point to be using this as an all-purpose political figures get tried by a court of 71 source. It's not clear to me how expansive that's going to be. That are there other political figures we haven't mentioned yet who would fit in this category also? I don't know. Maybe, or maybe not. Maybe it's just the Kohen Gadol and the tribal leaders. I don't know. Kings don't usually get tried at all. So that's too high up the political ladder, and I'm not sure how far down the political ladder you can go and still be in this category. Meitive. So we're going to challenge it anyway, because Rav Ada bar Ahava is doing a little bit of violence to the language here in Yitro's words. Yitro said big thing. He did not say thing of big. And they're different. So Meitive davar gadol davar kashe. So we're bringing a challenge from a Braita that says a big thing is a difficult thing, which if you had given any of us this pasuk to look at yesterday out of context, we would all have said, yeah, that means a case that the lower court doesn't know the answer to. That seems like a reasonable interpretation of Yitro. But the Braita says, Ataomer davar kashe. Do you really think that it's a difficult thing? Oh, ela davarav shagado, or maybe it's really a thing that relates to somebody big. Kishehu omer et hadavar hakashe yaviu el Moshe, when it says a little bit later in chapter 18 of Shemot, 4 psukim later, not so much later, they would bring the difficult thing to Moshe, and this seems to be the narrator narrating the same thing that Yitro was prospectively describing 4 verses ago. Hare davar kashe amor. So now I know what it means, because it told me in slightly different language this time. The new language is clearer. I know what it's telling me retrospectively that when it said a big thing, what it meant was a difficult thing, because that's how it's describing apparently the same thing 4 verses later. So this Braita seems to consider what Rav Ada bar Ahava said and reject it explicitly. And Rav Ada bar Ahava is an Amora, so that should just be the end of him. Except it never works that way, because it turns out that there's another Tana. Huda Amar ki hai Tana de Tanya, but it turns out Rav Ada bar Ahava is actually speaking in accordance with this other Tana who taught in a different Braita. Davar gadol, dvarav shel gadol. A big thing, that's things of a big person. Dvarav shel gadol, oeno ela davar hakashe. Do you think it's really things of big people? Nah, maybe it's really something hard. Kishehu omer hadavar hakashe, hare davar kashe amor. When it says the difficult thing, that over there in verse 26, that's talking about difficult things. Hamani mekayem davar gadol. So davar gadol must be something else, because it doesn't need to say the same thing twice. So what's a big thing? A big thing is dvarav shel gadol. That's things that belong to big people. So these 2 Braitot actually mirror each other, and each one seems to be directly addressing the other one and explaining why it doesn't agree with the other one. And Rav Ada bar Ahava is just taking sides, which is legit. But now we want to know how each of the 2 Braitot fully understood the whole text. The High Tana Trey Krai Lamalu. So the first Tana, the one that we challenged Rav Ada bar Ahava with, why does he think we need 2 verses? Because he thinks they're both saying the same thing. One of them is describing Yetro's instructions about what to do, and the other is a narration telling us what happened. They're just literally separate. They're not actually describing different things. It's just telling the story in order. First we tell you to do it, and then you do it. And those are two separate sentences. V'idach, and how about the second Breita? Why doesn't it buy that? Because remember, the second Breita is basing itself on, it wouldn't have told me the same thing twice. These two things have to have different meanings. So it apparently doesn't buy the first, you tell me what to do, and then you tell me, and then you can say that I did it. So the other one says, Im kain lichtov o gadol gadol o kashe kashe. So that that other position should either say, sorry, if the Torah is telling me the same thing twice, once as an instruction and once as a narration, then it should use the same word both times, either big or difficult, but not two separate words. My gadolu, my kashe. So why does it say both big and difficult? Shema mina tarti, in order to teach me two separate things, one thing from each. Okay. Now, Rabbi Elazar, just for fun, stick something in here at the end. By Rabbi Elazar, Shoro shel Kohen Gadol bekam. So Rabbi Elazar says, well, how many judges judge a case in which the high priest's ox has killed somebody? So you might remember from before Pesach that we talked about the, the ox that killed somebody being killed by a court that would normally try human murderers, because there was a connection in the pasuk between the life of their death, actually, of the ox and the death of the owner. And we said we're going to kill the ox using the same procedure that we would have used to kill its owner. So Rabbi Elazar is saying, okay, but now I have a guy who, if he actually commits a murder, he's going to be tried by a court of 71. So does his ox get killed by a court of 23, because normal ox owners get killed by courts of 23 and normal oxen get killed by courts of 23? Or do we care that this particular ox, in the event that its particular owner had committed a murder, would be tried in a court of 71? We're not actually going to answer this question, incidentally, but we're going to make an interesting inference from the fact that the question got asked, and then we're going to ignore it. Okay. So the mitat ba'alim didei midaminanle, do we compare him to the death of his own owner? Odilma mitat ba'alim ba'alma midaminanle, or maybe we are going to compare him to the deaths of normal owners. Amar Abaye. So Abaye says, midaka mibayale shoro michlal de mamono pshito. Abaye says, the fact that Rabbi Elazar is asking about the ox of the Kohen Gadol, who I have a special reason for thinking would be tried by a different court because an ox is tried like an owner, that tells me that normal property cases of the Kohen Gadol's property are tried just like anybody else. That he's not saying, if I claim that the Kohen Gadol owes me $1,000, does that get tried in the court of 71? That, it seems, is just a normal case. The only case that Rabbi Elazar was concerned about is the capital case of the ox. And that was because if the Kohen Gadol is going to be on trial for his life, he'll get tried in the court of 71. But it sounds like normal property cases involving high priests are just normal property cases. So the Gemara responds, but wait a minute, Abaye, that's obvious. Why are you telling me that? Pshita. Ma'udetema. So whenever we say pshita, it's always followed with, well, this is the incorrect inference you would have made if it had not told me that. So ma'udetema, what might you have said? Ho'il v'katav kol davar gadol, since the pasuk that we've been interpreting says every big thing, and it seems to be talking about things. And then we interpreted that as called the Varav Shel Gadol, all of the things of the big person. We might have thought that that's not like court cases pertaining to the big person. We might have thought it's actually the things, literally the property of the big person that needs to be tried in a court of 71. Kamash Malan, no, in fact, we are concluding that the property of a gadol is just stuff. It's going to get tried in a normal court. The only cases where the Kohen Gadol or presumably the Nasi of the Shevet are going to be tried differently are capital cases where they are personally on trial for their lives. Or they're oxen who are parallel to that. Okay, thank you. Are there questions?
So Dvarav Shel Gadol, any consensus?
So, I mean, we seem to think that the Mishnah is ruling, like Ravada Bar Ahava, that that it means that Hadavar Hagadol means things related, or capital matters related to important people.
Mm-hmm.
Although saying the Mishnah rules like Ravada Bar Ahava is like me saying, oh, look, Rashi agrees with me. Right? I have the history completely backwards, but whatever. That's the order in which we heard the position, so I'm going to deal with it that way.
Right.
So it seems like legally we seem to rule like Ravada Bar Ahava. The other side is also seems plausible, but it leaves us without a way to understand our mission. So
Right.
we're unlikely to go with it.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Thank you guys. Hopefully everybody will have an uneventful and happy week, and I'll see you guys next Monday.
Terrific.
Please,
Thank you so much.
Give a shalema to your family.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Good night.
Good night.